I feel like video games have a weird way of handling drugs and drug use. And by that I mean they don't. Can you think of a game where a main character struggles from an addiction? Any games with an alcoholic character that deeply affects the story. Movies discuss this subject pretty often.
It was in front of you. Fades and you gotta get high again.
And video games have proven over time that they're just as worthy of an art form when it comes to providing deep, meaningful, and impactful narratives. So why does something that personally affects roughly 46% of the US population go practically unmentioned in prominent video game narratives? Normally when I ask, why doesn't blank game exist or do blank, the answer is usually rooted in controversy and the way that game publishers don't want to unnecessarily risk controversy with certain types of narratives or other things that could provide undue risk to a game's production. And with the gaming industry looking the way it currently does, I don't really blame them. But when it comes to discussing addiction, I don't immediately feel that that's really all that controversial. Game developers like Rockstar aren't afraid to show casual drug use and even the dealer side of illegal drug use.
The plan is you keep doing that like a moron.
So if not controversy, what reasons would any game developer have not to take a serious approach to the damaging effects of drugs that are already shown regularly in the medium? I'm wondering if one reason could be that games, more often than not, set out to create a power fantasy for its players in some kind of way. Most video games try to create feelings of strength and growth through story arcs that generally end in a pretty positive way. Even a game like The Last of Us, which hosts a truly depressing world and atmosphere, delivers relative feelings of strength through gameplay and a strong emphasis on love and human relationships throughout the award-winning narrative. There is a careful curation of feelings that they want the player to feel while spending time with The Last of Us. Equal parts the depressing nature of the world, fear of the monsters, and other humans that lurk around the corners, combined with the stress that comes along with scavenging for supplies, that's all balanced out by wielding the power of a man who can just kill anything with his bare hands. All of that layered on top of the thrilling, emotional nature of the narrative that sees him come to think of Ellie as an adopted daughter. Breaking down a game in this way, maybe game developers and story writers feel that bringing to life a realistic interpretation of a true drug or alcohol problem may hit too close to home for a lot of people and end up creating an imbalance of the emotions they want a player to feel while playing a game. Maybe a game that really takes a deep dive on the topic of addiction would need to be centered around that premise on an emotional level in order to be greenlit for production. Maybe another reason is just simply that a story hasn't been written that incorporates the topic very well. Video games are typically set in a moderately unrealistic setting. Aspects of them may or may not be grounded in any sort of reality. And I do feel like it's safe to say there aren't a great many games that can do a great job of showing the more mundane and realistic aspects of daily life. This could maybe apply to the details it would take to portray addiction in a deep way. I still think it's possible to get this mix right, but I think this could maybe explain some of the apprehension from a developer to make a game like this. It's much easier to give a story drama through big world-ending fictional events, as most games currently do. So let's talk about how games do currently discuss drugs, as this could also provide some insight. One of the games that first comes to mind when discussing drugs is Fallout, and the way it incorporates Jet into its world. Usually the violent bandits the player encounter can be found with the Wasteland's most notorious drug. The player can then use the drug for short benefits to damage output and resistance to the detriment of their health. There's even a system where if the player uses the drug enough, they can become addicted and require the drug to avoid damage from withdrawal effects. It's really a neat system to have in a game, and at least it's some kind of attempt to depict the way various substances can cause damage to a person. But it's nothing particularly deep or thoughtful, but it does lay the foundation for a game that does take a addiction withdrawal gameplay loop that could somehow be incorporated into a story that discusses the topic deeper. Then we have the Grand Theft Auto games that are known to offer players satirical versions of US culture of hyperbole paired with the constant presence of underground crime. This means that drugs are very often present in these games. And they all do differ. Like, a game such as Grand Theft Auto 5 and the lack of seriousness in its narrative would be a bad candidate to genuinely attempt any serious inclusion of addiction. Though a game like Grand Theft Auto 4 or either Red Dead Redemption game do provide settings and narratives that could realistically deal with something so gritty in tone. And this again creates a situation where I feel it's kind of odd that we haven't seen addiction come up more seriously in a Rockstar game, or at least any of the ones I've played. Because we all know that Rockstar as a studio is more than capable. But no, they typically just float and dance around the subject, letting players operate as drug dealers, frequently depicting characters using drugs or alcohol, maybe implying abuse in those scenarios, but never digging any deeper. And any other game, at least one that I've played, will pretty commonly use either of these two styles, almost like templates for how they handle drugs in their gameplay or narratives. But what I'm trying to say is, video games are a very unique medium. Given how common it is to have drug abuse affect your life in one way or another, it's shocking how we haven't yet and probably won't see a storyline in GTA 6 that grapples with the moral dilemma of dealing drugs. Or that we haven't seen a developer attempt to use gameplay to illustrate the way the disease of addiction can really affect a person, putting players in the shoes of those who have to make bad decisions while under the influence, and seeing how that can affect family members or other characters. And I'm not saying this looking for some sort of half-ass inclusion to just partially put it in a game, and nor does it need to be everywhere. Not every game that discusses drugs needs to have a deeper meaning. But games where drug use actually has a place and has the potential to tell a really interesting story, it should take advantage of that. When talking about this topic to my wife, I ended up putting it this way. My dad suffered from drug addiction during periods of my young childhood. Some movies and TV shows have definitely triggered strong emotions in me with their accurate portrayals of drug use and addiction. It recently occurred to me that I've never felt that while playing a video game, making me wonder why video games don't discuss the topic more in depth than they do. Because my favorite pieces of media, whether it be movies, books, or video games, are ones that hit me on a deep emotional level. And anything that really nails the feeling of watching loved ones struggle with addiction has a good chance to stick with me in a meaningful way. And just thinking about it in this way made me realize that no video game narratives really talk about this feeling, and it made me wonder why, and made me want to talk about it. Though I haven't played every game, so there may be one that really does take a realistic, heartfelt approach to addiction that I didn't know about or haven't played yet. Let me know in the comments if there's a game I missed and should check out, because it's really cool the way entertainment mediums can connect to our lives and tell stories that really resonate with us. And it just makes me wonder why video games don't talk about drug use more than they do. Thanks for watching.